The Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they answered him, "John the Baptist, and others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." He asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Messiah." And Jesus sternly ordered them not to tell anyone about him. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. Grace, mercy, and peace to you from our God who creates us, redeems us, and makes us a holy people. Amen. All the kids in the kindergarten class were drawing pictures. Little Laura was working very diligently. Her teacher walked over to Laura and asked her what she was up to. And Laura said, "I'm drawing God." The teacher got a little anxious. She said, "But no one knows what God looks like." And Laura said, "Just wait, they will in a minute." Who knows if that could have been our Laura? In a sense, Jesus is asking the disciples today in our gospel reading to draw a picture of God. He asks, "Who do you say that I am?" And like little Laura, Peter seems very confident. "You are the Messiah." Peter knows what God looks like too. So let me ask you this. If you had drawn a picture of God when you were in kindergarten, what would that picture look like? Where did it come from? And if I was to ask you to draw a picture of God today, right now, what would you draw? Today, Jesus asks you and me, as well as Peter and the disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" He's asking you and me to paint pictures of God, too. For most of us, I think that picture may come from what we learned in Sunday school. We have a great example of one young woman's picture of God up here on the screen. Traditionally, the Sunday school year always starts on Rally Day, the first Sunday after Labor Day. Across the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, Rally Day has morphed into a day designated as God's Work Our Hands Sunday. This is a day when congregations engage in service projects in the community. Well, TLC has been engaged this way all year long, even through the pandemic. And today we've brought food to share with the Fenton Center of Hope. And today at TLC Rally Day has been our secret code of all these weeks for Laura Day. Yeah, now you get it. A day full of surprises. How else were we supposed to keep this celebration of Laura's 25 years of service as music director at TLC a surprise, especially when Laura also stepped up to serve as the church secretary until Pastor Kate comes on board and you can find a new office administrator together. So you really had no clue, Laura? Yes. Well, kudos to Marlene Lehman. She's the mastermind behind this whole thing. Thank you, Marlene. Can't believe we pulled this off. But really, it all comes together for us today. With this gospel, God's work, our Hands Sunday, Rally Day, and Laura Day, all these themes are really about our response to that question. Who do you say that I am? And about how that response is formed in our minds and in our hearts. In short, it's all about faith. I've done a lot of teaching of the faith over the years in Sunday school and other settings. And you know, I think if I'm honest, I would admit that faith cannot really be taught. Rather, faith is caught. I caught the faith primarily in two ways: from music and from relationships. From singing in the choir loft, or going over and over and over the music and the words in rehearsals, or holding a hymn book in the pew, surrounded by the cloud of witnesses that was the congregation where I belonged. Or sitting by myself at the piano for hours on end. I used to start at the beginning of the hymn book and play every hymn until I made a mistake, and then I'd have to start at the beginning again. I caught the faith from relationships with friends and family with whom I sang, or who led the groups in which I sang, or with whom I could engage in conversation and service projects, with whom I shared in laughter and even just plain old fun. My faith was caught. Honestly, I can hardly remember much that I learned in a formal way in formal Sunday school or confirmation class. I remember some. I can count on one hand sermons that I remember, even the ones that I've preached myself. But I do remember my friends, and I remember the music. Just this past week, in fact, with so much of the news being so difficult to digest, what is it that has kept me grounded? The sound of Laura's voice in my head, singing last Sunday, "There is nothing better than you. Nothing is better than you," referring to God, of course. Which is why TLC is so very blessed to have Laura serving in this incredibly important role as director of music for 25 years. Laura is a gift from God to us. She's one who paints a picture of God, not only by what she does, but by who she is. When I was in high school, our church had a singing group of high school kids that put on musicals and toured around the Midwest. I grew very close to the director and his wife because 4 of us who had speaking parts used to ride with them in the back seat of their car when we were going on to do these performances to practice going over our lines. I also babysat their children, Tim and Karna. Tim grew up and was headed to Harvard after he graduated from St. Olaf College to become an architect. But he wanted to take a year off in between to do mission work first. When he was asked, "Who do you say that I am?" he saw Jesus as a man, a servant to emulate. When Tim preached a sermon his senior year in college, he reflected on a phrase that he remembered from a hymn. "Take my will and make it thine. It shall be no longer mine." During that year after college, he went to the Central African Republic to oversee the building of a church. But his time there was met with unspeakable tragedy. His American girlfriend came to visit. On their way back from visiting a game preserve one day, they were held up by bandits. She survived, but he died as a result of gunshot wounds to his leg. As I was thinking about Laura and this very special day, I was reminded of the words that appeared on the cover of Tim's funeral bulletin. They capture the gift God has given us in Laura and the gifts she gives through her music, her leadership, and her person. It's a quote from a woman named Donna J. Stone. "The most visible creators," she writes, "are those artists whose medium is life itself. The ones who express the inexpressible without brush, hammer, clay, or guitar, or we might add keyboard. They neither paint nor sculpt. Their medium is simply being. Whatever their presence touches has increased life. They see, but they don't have to draw, because they are the artists of being alive. The artists of being alive." Today we are so blessed to thank God for the blessing of Laura Blanchard, who is still drawing God as an artist of being alive. One who helps us answer the question, "Who do you say that I am?" Laura is a painter of pictures of God, from whom we are catching the faith week in and week out. Thank you, Laura. And thank you, good and gracious God, for such a gift. Can I hear an amen?